So, moving on to a story that came to my attention via Twitter. This was a Twitter thread that I noticed that, let's see, it was Rachel Pope had commented on Twitter, and she seemed particularly concerned that an event should be, or say rather, must be stopped, and was asking if someone had contacted the British Museum about something, and this got me raised an eyebrow. It got me curious, and all I really could pick up about this was a detectorist rally of sorts was in the offing, and that there were some problems associated with it. Unfortunately, I was otherwise engaged at the time. I was doing some work, God forbid. Um,
As we have
uh,
to sometimes.
yeah, as we have to
We
sometimes.
try and avoid it, but
Oh, work. Um, but it seems that this story is very important, and so I'm going to hand over to you to just lay out some of the groundwork here. No pun intended. What is this story about?
right. This is about metal detecting rallies,
Hmm.
and one in particular that was scheduled to happen last weekend on the 28th, 29th of September 2019, as we're recording today.
And well,
Um,
sorry, just before we go on, what is a metal detecting rally, just for folks at home?
right, a metal detecting rally is when a group of metal detectorists get together in the same place and detect stuff.
Okay,
Um, it is perfectly legal. It can be done commercially, as was the case here, or it can be done for charity.
commercially meaning they
Um,
may tend to make a
Meaning
profit.
it's for profit.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
the organisers intend to make a profit. They
Okay.
charge people to come along and detect on this piece of land, and it's becoming quite a significant part of the metal detecting leisure economy
Right.
in the UK at the moment. Um, it also causes concerns among archaeologists, and that's what lies at the root of this story, which I'll go on to describe, I think.
Hmm.
Um, Basically, during last week, a member of the public who was aware of discussions of this rally at a place called Old Cannings in Wiltshire
Hmm.
contacted the fines liaison officer for Wiltshire, who's the person who records metal detecting fines for the portable antiquities scheme. That is, if they're declared. It's not compulsory. Um, and the county archaeologist, saying that the proposed rally at All Cannings was maybe of concern because the site that they were proposing to hold the rally on includes what the county archaeologist described to me as a nationally important early Iron Age settlement and midden, a rubbish dump effectively, along with human remains and early metalworking.
Okay.
Now, uh, obviously, because we have that kind of information, that yes, the site had been dug by earlier archaeologists to a degree, but obviously a large part of the site was still there,
Well,
intact,
and also
and it's
also
very
it
sensitive.
was and is technically unscheduled as well, so it's not on a formal protected list
That is
as
what
such.
that is part of the problem here,
Mm.
because although it's described as nationally significant, it hadn't been scheduled and given protection, but legal protection.
Hmm.
Therefore, it was perfectly legal to organise a rally there. However, that does it did contravene the uh, Code for Responsible
Hmm.
Metal detecting rather, which is a code of practice which is promoted by the Portable Antiquities Scheme, Historic England, and other parties, but it isn't endorsed by the latest edition, at least, isn't endorsed by the National Council for Metal Detectorists.
Okay.
Um, what the what the code says is that liaising with both the local fines liaison officer and the historic environment record officer as early as possible, at least 12 weeks before the event, to see whether any areas of the proposed rally site include known archaeological sites. The organisers should provide the fines liaison officer and other parties with maps of at least 1 to 25,000, annotated with the fields to be searched and the expected number of participants. If the historic environment record shows that the rally includes a known archaeological site, then the HER officer and FLO may discuss with the rally organiser how best to ensure an adequate record of fines is obtained. For particularly significant sites, it may be appropriate to limit the number of people attending the rally or the area to be searched. Now, as I said, that is a voluntary code. It is designed to be permissive of metal detecting, but responsible metal detecting with archaeological intervention that is scaled to the significance of the site. Now, again, remember, all cannings, it's been described by the county archaeologist as nationally significant. So therefore, it would fall into the area probably of under the code, limiting the number of people to attend the rally or the area to be searched.
Okay.
They will say basically, we know there's archaeology in that particular area, stay off it, please.
Yeah. Incidentally, as well, we'll put a link to the code
And the
below.
important thing to,
We'll
yeah,
put a link below.
thank
yeah.
you, absolutely. But again, I have been told by the county archaeologist that in this case, none of those things were done.
Right. Okay.
So the organisers did not approach the FLO, did not approach the historic environment officer, did not approach the county archaeologist.
Right. Okay.
So there was no discussions of this until 3 days before the event was to take place, when they were tipped off by a member of the public that the rally was proposed.
Well, and actually, to be fair, and we should really highlight here, because PAS Wiltshire did, Portable Antiquities Scheme Wiltshire did, that this member of the public was a fellow detectorist.
Indeed.
So a detectorist has made us aware of the Southwest Detectorist UK metal detecting rally at All Cannings, Wiltshire. So again, we're not characterising, this isn't a broad brush tarring exercise. It's a very specific examination of a particular event that was planned.
Yeah. Again, as I understand it from talking to parties involved, the county archaeologist then had discussions with the landowner and with the organisers. And the upshot was that certainly by Friday afternoon, some detectorists argue earlier, but they haven't presented any evidence of that. But certainly by Friday afternoon, the event was cancelled. Now, the fallout from it, though, is largely on social media, because there are a number of very vocal and angry metal detectorists who think that the county archaeologist and the Portable Antiquities Scheme Finds Liaison Officer behaved in an inappropriate and high-handed way. However, there are many other people, including other detectorists, but also people in the archaeological world, who think they behaved entirely properly. And in fact, although I understand that the approaches that were made at county level in Wiltshire weren't cleared before they were made with the national management of the Portable Antiquities Scheme at the British Museum. The Portable Antiquities Scheme nationally have said they support what was done, and they support support the code of practice as it is laid down, and they stress that the code shows that metal detectorists have responsibilities that go beyond the purely legal.
Okay. And so what I suppose I find myself wondering, what does this mean in terms of the state of this subculture and this particular section of the way in which people in Britain interact with artifacts and physical history, in so much as we're also bundling in this month sort of an honourable mention link to this story, but it's something that for me has echoes of a story, unfortunately in the Sun newspaper, but this is the only link I could find that I could actually access, which examines Ivory Hunting Gangs destroying a 50,000-year-old mammoth graveyard by stealing prehistoric artifacts in their woods, in the headline, to flog on the black market for £65,000 up to a pop. In other words, there's a parallel here in so much as unregulated access to these sorts of deposits of material will result in those deposits being destroyed. And even though I understand and recognise that archaeology is an act of destruction, when you investigate a site, you have to be careful to record everything, because you can't rewrap the present. At the very least, I find myself wondering, where does this actually leave the reality, not best practice, but the reality of metal detecting in the UK at the moment? Are lots of presents being wrapped, or rather unwrapped, uh, without due care and responsibility?
I think the short answer to that is nobody really knows, because the research on this is intermittent. It's not consistent. There have been there are allegations put, which are then refuted by metal detectorists,
Mm,
or metal detecting organisations like the NCMD.
mm,
Um, all I can say is that on this, in this particular case, and it's anecdotal for Wiltshire, but when we're talking about these big commercial rallies, I think it's fair to say, first of all, there is a broad perception, I think, now in most of the archaeological community, that while individual metal detectorists going out, finding artifacts, reporting them through the PAS, so that at least the information enters the public domain and is able to be accounted and researched in future
mm,
on databases,
mm,
even if the artifacts aren't in museums, um, then the then metal detecting is at the very least tolerated.
mm, mm.
And some metal detectorists work in an exemplary way with archaeologists, and I'm sure I've certainly worked with metal detectorists who work for nothing and not wanted to keep fines and so on projects.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
You know,
They're often you have such metal detectorists, for example, doing uh, either low paid or unpaid work going through spoil heaps, for example, on archaeological digs, this kind of
indeed,
thing. Partly just out of their own interest. They're
absolutely,
fascinated to see to find this stuff. It's also worthwhile just
absolutely. But
oh,
sorry, but I just wanted to finish the point there.
mhm,
Um, I think the key point going forward is that I think there's an equally broad consensus developing, certainly in archaeology world, that these large commercial rallies are a problem.
mm,
Um, for on two levels. One is that obviously the sheer amount of material that they can recover in one day. If you've got 100 people all finding stuff on a field, even if the finds liaison officer turns up,
mhm,
the ability to record all that
mhm.
and enter it onto the database and so on, it's really pushing resources to the absolute limit, and in many cases beyond. So,
And that's a best case scenario. Also,
and that's a best case
yeah,
scenario.
yeah.
The point is, and again, here I can quote um, uh, the uh, Melanie Pomeroy Killinger, who's the county archaeologist for Wiltshire,
Mhm,
who was happy to go on the record, and I'm writing a background piece about this for the pipeline,
mhm,
and she was happy to go on the record and said two things. I asked, does the Archaeology Service see metal detecting, and particularly commercial rallies, as a current or increasing problem in Wiltshire? So
mm,
this is just on county level.
mhm,
And she told me there's an increase in rallies, both commercial and community stroke charity, which we don't hear about and are not notified in advance
mm,
to us or the fines liaison officer. We don't want to stop all rallies, but we want to have advance notification so we can help avoid these last minute difficulties and situations, and avoid damaging sites like this one. So,
mm.
again, it's saying, please work with us and we can work with you.
Yeah, yeah.
But we can't, you know, ethically responsible. We have to have an eye to the historic environment. It's an environmental issue.
Yeah,
Um,
and the thing is, the reason why I suppose why I mentioned best case scenario is that in that sort of volume, one FLO in a field of metal detectorists, it's entirely possible to find something, quickly cover it over again, and not report it, and then come back and so on and so forth. There's all sorts of things that might happen, and
but there are
crucially,
many stories and allegations, none of which have been proven at the moment.
hmm hmm
But
yeah, no,
you
absolutely,
know,
but also crucially, it was really nice to see in, for example, the Twitter thread here actually a robust response to this from fellow archaeologists. As someone, Durham FLO Ben Westwood says, at FLO Durham FLO on Twitter, says that uh, endearing ourselves to detectorists is not really the way to go. Detectorists have an ethical responsibility to report all finds to their finds liaison officer and heed advice of local heritage organisations. All too often, and I'm quoting, I'm linking here quotes together, tweets together. All too often, these huge rallies have nothing or little to do, rather, with, I suppose, with local heritage and communities, but are about cash. He ends his thread over this little section by saying, but we must work together, talk to and respect each other, and take responsibility for the care of our local heritage. If rally organisers won't engage, then there's little else archaeologists can do. And I think it's good to know that in this instance, little else doesn't mean stepping back, doesn't mean being quiet. It means having a robust response and and publicly enforcing standards uh, which, as you say, national bodies do, broadly speaking, sign up to.
Absolutely. And again, I just finish really this with a comment again from Melanie Pomeroy-Killinger, the county archaeologist, who said, I asked how this kind of row could be prevented in the future, because it's been if you look at the social media and so on, it's pretty bloody. There have been accusations flying. There have been accusations about personal conduct of people involved, with no evidence what's really that actually that is the case. So it's been pretty nasty. People have been doing their jobs and they've been flamed. What Melanie said was, we need to raise awareness that the code for responsible detecting includes notification to finds liaison officer and historic and environment record, and that if they are asked not to detect on highly significant sites, they shouldn't do so, and avoid putting landowners in difficult positions. We need resources to help us identify and tell landowners about significant sites on their land that could be damaged by detecting, and to get more of them scheduled if this is the only way of protecting them. There needs to be a wider awareness of what responsible detecting is. It's not just about meeting minimum legal standards and of avoiding designated sites.
Yeah.
Of course, the problem is it is one of both financial and physical resources, in terms of the amount it costs to police monitor events like this, and the number of FLOs there are, and the workload of FLOs, and there have been cutbacks in the Portable Antiquities Scheme, and at county level among archaeology teams as well. So we're talking about a difficult situation. There's been a tendency to avoid scheduling, because that can be that they're afraid of being archaeologists have been afraid of being accused of restraining trade, restraining development, and things like that. Again, commercial pressures to avoid giving absolute legal protection to places, and ultimately, under the Treasures Act and other legislation, metal detecting, has to be said, remains legal, with fewer restrictions actually than if you want to go fishing.
Yeah, and actually we'll return to that later in this watching brief. I suppose it's also worthwhile just returning to this notion that this is a collective responsibility thing. As you say, we archaeologists can't police all of this, but also we shouldn't be, and we aren't, in a very real way, we aren't the sole gatekeepers to the
Guardians.
past, or guardians.
Absolutely.
We should all be have a vested interest in this, and it's nice to see that it was a detectorist who flagged this, so we can work together.
I think that's my positive takeaway from all this, is that yes, a detectorist was concerned that this wasn't responsible, that this could damage their hobby as much as it could damage the historic environment. Went to the FLO, went to county, and tipped them off. Yes, the upshot here was messy, but hopefully people will learn lessons from it on all sides. And the other thing, of course, is this is happening in the shadow of the consultation on changes to the Treasures Act and the associated legislation and codes at a national legal level, which was consulted by the DCMS earlier this year. Of course, there are certain other things going on, B word, which have distracted government. But at some point, there will be a response to the consultation, and I suspect that certainly there will have been pressure from archaeological groups and individuals who say that certainly there need to be restrictions put in place on rallies.
Okay.